Hey everybody, Andy from Tennis Euphoria, bringing you a review of the Head Boom Pro 2024. A new paint job, I think that is an improvement. You've got more of that sort of turquoisey colour, less of the black. That will be very much a personal thing as to whether you prefer that. On the face of it, not a lot has changed with this update to the Boom Pro. The Boom was a new line for Head on previous release. We still have a 98 square inch frame, 22mm constant beam. The Pro is, of course, the heaviest and arguably the most stable of the Boom family, and it would be targeted at your more advanced players. In terms of tech and update, then we've got Auxetic 2.0 present here, replacing 1.0. Still have graphene in head frames. Head do a much better job of getting the most out of graphene nowadays. Mine was close to spec at 308 grams unstrung. Once I'd added a leather grip and strung with Solinco Toolbite Soft, head links touch in the crosses, and no dampener. I was at a 315 swing weight, which was kind of good. Luckily, that pretty much matched the previous iteration version that I have. You have a slightly lower RA. I've seen a 64 RA recorded by Tennis Warehouse. I think that would be accurate. I'd be guessing at 63, 64. And that's possibly a little bit softer than the previous edition. But I think what's hard to judge is that Auxetic 2.0 could be accounting for that. And the frame does feel a little bit more plush and a little bit more muted. In terms of how it compares to the previous edition, here's my previous version, pretty much same swing weight, strung the same leather grip. What I can tell you is that the hitting experience is pretty much exactly the same if you're considering things like power generation, launch angle. There is a change in feel. Auxetic 2.0 delivers a little bit more of a muted feel. In other head frames, Auxetic 2.0 seems to increase stability. I don't think that really is the case here. And one thing I've come to realize is that the heavier the frame in stock, the less impact Auxetic 2.0 will have. So, for example, the Head Prestige Pro, a fairly heavy frame, I felt that Auxetic 2.0 didn't really make much difference. I think that's probably the case here too, to be honest. Any frame that's sort of 310 target and above, it doesn't seem to make as much difference to stability, etc., compared to the lighter offerings from Head. And maybe that's something to consider if you're looking and playing with other head frames that are lighter. I think Auxetic 2.0 has more of an impact, which is all logical because it's offering more stability, perhaps a bit more comfort. If you were to chuck some silicone in the handle of the previous edition, or even just put on a dampener, then you'd have something that plays very, very similar to this second edition. So is the Boom Pro a good frame? Well, Tennis Euphoria is the home of a racket matching service. We deliver that over 2 quite long on-court based sessions. The first is all about assessment to understand which category of frame is right for you. The second is then in-depth demo and match play to see how well you perform with various frames from various manufacturers within your identified category. So category of this is really interesting to me. I obviously want to understand where it sits, want to understand how it compares to other frames too. I think the interesting thing about the Boom Pro is it could compete against some frames and go across various categories. One of the obvious competitors to this would be the V-Core lines. You have ultimately quite a similar shape to the head shape. I think this compares most to the V-Core 98 Tour, not the standard 305. There is a difference. The V-Core 98 Tour is a bit harder to swing, would give you a bit more power. If you were to compare this to other frames from the headline, then the Radical MP, particularly if you were to customize it, would give you a more predictable response, slightly lower launch angle. The Extreme Tour would give you a bit more spin. The Extreme Tour I always think has quite a strange sort of hitting sensation though, however. Then you have some others. This sits sort of in between the Technofiber T-Fight, both the 300 and the 315. It would sit somewhere in between those. So I think the Boom Pro could sit in sort of numerous categories and will probably make its way into lots of demo sessions for customers at Tennis Euphoria. But what are the characteristics, I guess, for the purpose of this review? Well, it hits with quite a lot of power, a fairly high launch angle, and it does generate a lot of spin. I think from a control perspective, that's an interesting one because it isn't as directionally reliable as other control frames, I find. And I think if you are playing with slightly bigger margins within your game compared to an all-out control frame like a Blade, Percept, even Radical, then this could work quite well because you are getting a little bit more pop. Again, it's probably offering a little bit more control than your typical tweener and all-out power frames. So, if you were looking at something like the Babolat Pure Aero 98 or both of the V-Cores, then I think you're probably getting just a touch more control out of these than you certainly would that Babolat, in my view. And actually a similar launch angle. So I think it's got quite a lot going for it. One thing that I do think the Boom Pro has got is quite a nice feel now. If you're somebody who appreciates head feel, particularly of yesteryear, then you do start to have that nice connected feeling, particularly if you play without a dampener with this. Comfort is also really good with the Boom Pro, so I think that is something to keep in mind too. I found that there was big benefit in stringing this a little bit lower. It seemed to open up more power and the sweet spot a little. So I actually restrung down at £48 and thought that was a positive thing compared to the 52. Didn't play my best tennis with this, possibly because I've got a little bit of a niggling back injury at the moment, so that's sort of slowing me down a little bit. One thing that was noticeable though is that the Boom Pro does hit quite an awesome serve, similar to the E-Zone 98 in terms of its ability to create a good serve. I actually prefer the Boom Pro to the E-Zone 98 though with regards to predictability of response and control, so I would edge towards this over the standard E-Zone 98 305, that's for sure. So a good frame. There is an adjustment period, totally agree. I think it was Luca from Rackets and Runners that talk about this frame having a big adjustment period and then it being sort of really good once people have settled into that. I would concur with that. Found that myself, and also I found a couple of our customers who have hit this in the first assessment phase and then come back to it in the more in-depth demo phase. I've had quite a different experience with it on that second demo phase, so that adaptation seems to take place and people gel with it quite well. So the Boom, interesting. I sort of actually think this would suit Lorenzo Musetti. Musetti doesn't play with this. He plays with a version of the Extreme Tour, I understand. I think this frame could suit him quite well, and I do think it's the sort of frame that will make its way to being more popular as time goes on, more people have experience with it. Thanks for watching, plenty more reviews to come, and I'm working on other content. It takes a long time to put together these videos, particularly when it is something you're doing along the side across busy jobs. So any likes and subscribes would be really greatly appreciated, as that helps me make many more. Thanks again for watching. See you in the next one.